So this segment's topic is something that I wondered if I should have maybe looked at previously, because it gives some foundational background knowledge to how I approach things. But be that as may, this is how we're doing it. When I think about counseling, when I think about therapy, there's lots of different ways that I kind of conceptualize it. And one of them is that we're looking at increasing the knowledge, the skills, the attitudes. We're doing some kind of a change in those areas for the individuals with whom we're working. And beyond that, well, actually, let me first of all explain that. Okay, so knowledge is the idea that there is certain information that by knowing it, by understanding it, is going to make a difference in your lives. Skills are those things that when we practice them, we use them, they are patterns of behavior, maybe not necessarily patterns, but they are behaviors and actions that when we make use of them can make a difference. And then attitudes are the ways of thought that we have. Lots of times that's about how we interpret the world. It's about patterns of thought. Again, patterns are pretty important things that come up in counseling. And so those are the way that I would kind of define those three areas. And then further, I've been thinking about the idea that we can look at how easy it is for us to make change in those areas. And we look at how easy it is, it seems to me, and again the graphic kind of shows this, that it is easier to give knowledge than it is to kind of teach skills, especially skills that a person becomes really kind of used to and they become natural. And that is easier than changing attitudes. Okay, attitudes are pretty difficult to change because they are fairly entrenched ways of thinking. So the ease of change is one way for us to take a look at it. But then you'll also see on the graphic that I talk a little bit about the impact of those changes. And it seems to me that the impact of your skills change is relatively low, especially if by skill change we're talking about something like mirroring, which you might know. The idea that when somebody speaks, you kind of say back to the person what it is that you have heard. That can look very artificial, okay? Especially if you think it's just kind of a magic thing to do. Or another one is using I statements. If we call it magic, the magic in I statements is not so much that you say I feel, I think. That's not it. It is the idea that you have shifted the way that you converse so that you are taking responsibility for your perspectives and so on. But if it's merely about I, that level of skilling, and that's basically what I think of as skills, is not fundamentally really powerful, okay? Unless there's a lot of other integration taking place. But the impact of our knowledge is a little bit, I think, more beyond our skills. So there are things that once we understand them are going to probably feed back into our skills, how we interact with other people, and they're more useful. So an example of that we'll probably spend a little bit of time talking about at one point is the love languages. So all the love languages are not earth-shatteringly difficult to understand. They're not the end point for our understandings about relationships and stuff. Chapman's work with the love languages did introduce a way for us to think about things, to understand other things, and I think it has the ability, just by that knowledge piece, to really change how we interact with one another and to improve our relationships. So, as an example, that's how knowledge, I think, has a bigger impact than skill change does. But I really believe that the biggest impact comes from attitude change. And you'll remember that attitude change is the most difficult, I think, of those three areas: skill, knowledge, attitude. But it's also where most of the power is. So if we can change how we think, how we deal with our thoughts, our perspectives, all of those kinds of things, if we deal with what we think of as a problem or as an opportunity or as a challenge and so on, that can really radically transform how we approach everything that we are doing. And for those of us who get stuck in patterns and cycles, or find ourselves momentarily or for a period of time stuck, a change of attitude can provide so much energy to make the change to get us to a better place, which can be the beginning of habits of staying in a better place.